Beyond the sunlit waves lies a world of psychological horror and ancient gods, where warm-blooded monsters hunt multi-tentacled nightmares in absolute darkness. Blind phantoms outlive human empires, and our own toxic creations return to haunt our dinner plates. Welcome to the deep Pacific, a beautiful, weaponized library of survival. Don't blink, because the abyss is staring right back. Look closely at the weathered flesh of the Leviathan. These pale, circular rings stamped deep into the slate-gray skin of a 60-ton sperm whale are not natural markings, nor are they the gentle wear of time. They are battle scars. Each perfectly circular welt and jagged gash tearing across the whale's massive brow is a historical record written in blood, the permanent signature of razor-sharp, rotating chitinous hooks clinging to life in the crushing dark. They tell the story of an ancient, silent war waged every single day, thousands of feet beneath the surface, completely hidden from human eyes. To understand the true, raw nature of our planet's largest ocean, the mind must leave the light behind. We must follow this titan as it turns its massive bulk downward, plunging into a realm where human physics completely breaks down, and the rules of terrestrial life no longer apply. The sperm whale is a creature trapped between two worlds. At the surface, it breathes the same air we do, resting quietly under the open sky. But its true kingdom lies far below, in the mesopelagic zone, the twilight layer, a mile beneath the surface, where the last faint rays of blue sunlight completely fade into permanent midnight. As the whale dives deeper and deeper into this vertical desert, its heart rate slows to a mere handful of beats per minute, conserving every precious molecule of oxygen. Its lungs collapse under an unbearable mounting weight, a crushing hydrostatic pressure that would instantly flatten a steel submarine like an aluminum can. Down here, the pressure reaches a terrifying 2 tons per square inch. There is no vision, there is no light, there is no horizon. There is only an empty, freezing void where temperatures hover just above freezing. Yet the whale does not move with hesitation or fear. It navigates this black expanse with absolute, terrifying certainty, turning its entire 4-ton skull into a weaponized tracking system. By forcing air through specialized, muscular nasal passages just beneath its blowhole, it generates the loudest sound produced by any living being on Earth. A series of intense, rapid echolocation clicks. These focused acoustic shock waves slice through the pitch-black water, striking everything in their path and bouncing back to the whale's lower jaw, which acts as a hydrophone receptor. In the whale's mind, the darkness instantly vanishes, replaced by a perfect 3-dimensional acoustic map painted by sound. And right now, at the far edge of that sonic map, the whale has detected a shadow that has been waiting for it in the dark for over 100 million years. Suddenly, out of the gloom emerges a mountain of muscle and crimson skin, the Colossal Squid. This is the true, undisputed ruler of the deep abyss, Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni. Unlike its smaller, softer cousins, this half-ton titan of the trenches does not merely possess vulnerable, fleshy tentacles. The tips of its massive, undulating arms are armed with rows of swiveling, 3-inch-long hooks made of hardened chitin, sharp as surgical scalpels, and capable of tearing deep into mammalian blubber. This is the ultimate asymmetric showdown of the deep ocean. On one side, a warm-blooded, air-breathing mammal armed with a massive spermaceti-filled battering ram and a weaponized sonar blast that can stun prey with pure acoustic energy. On the other side, an ancient, cold-blooded invertebrate with blood based on blue copper, perfectly adapted to the crushing weight of the dark and armed with a ring of razor-sharp talons surrounding a crushing, parrot-like beak. When these two forces collide, The invisible water thrashes violently in total darkness. The squid wraps its hooked arms around the whale's massive head, digging deep into its flesh, trying desperately to locate the whale's blowhole to suffocate it, or its eyes to force a retreat. The whale rams its target with its massive head, using its lower jaw lined with heavy, conical teeth to crush the squid's soft mantle. It is a brutal, chaotic dance of survival, with no witnesses, no light, and no mercy. Eventually, the whale will ascend, returning to the surface to explode through the surface tension, taking a ragged breath under the stars and bearing fresh, bleeding rings on its face. The squid will either drift into the deep as a highly caloric meal, or slip back into the shadows to heal its torn arms. This exact primeval battle has played out millions of times across geological eras, an endless cycle of predator and prey locked in a perfect balance of evolutionary design. Back on the surface, the bright, blinding sun turns the water into a serene, calm, silver-blue sheet stretching infinitely to the horizon, where seagulls drift peacefully in the wind. When we look out from the shore at the Pacific Ocean, we see a vast, tranquil horizon. We see a peaceful expanse of water that Ferdinand Magellan named El Mar Pacifico, the peaceful sea, in the year 1520. But Magellan was fundamentally wrong. The peace of the Pacific is an illusion. It is a beautiful, deceptive mask, worn by a world of unrelenting violence, constant war, and absolute genius. Covering over 63 million square miles, more than a third of our entire planet's surface, the Pacific Ocean is not just a body of water. It is a sprawling, multi-layered gladiatorial arena. It is an active, ongoing testing ground for the most extreme evolutionary masterstrokes ever crafted by nature. From the blinding light of the surface waves to the crushing depths of the Mariana Trench, survival here is never an accident. It is a highly calculated, hyper-specialized science. Every organism that swims, drifts, or hides within this liquid kingdom is a living, breathing solution to a deadly environmental question. To survive in this vaster world, life cannot rely on simple strength alone. The ocean is too big, too deep, and too unpredictable for brute force to succeed for long. Instead, the creatures of the Pacific have been forced to weaponize everything imaginable. They have turned light into perfect camouflage, chemistry into devastating warfare, and their own genetic codes into blueprints for immortality. As we begin this vertical descent through the battlefields of the world's most volatile ocean, we will witness the ultimate triumph of adaptation. We will see that every single layer of this watery empire demands a completely different strategy for survival. And as we leave the surface world behind, we will learn that in the war of existence, the most lethal weapon an animal can possess is not its teeth, its size, or its claws. It is the sheer brilliance of its design. In the uppermost layer of the Pacific, the sun-drenched territory known as the epipelagic zone, the rules of survival undergo a drastic, uncompromising transformation. Here, where sunlight penetrates completely through the crystalline water, the protective shadows of the deep twilight zone vanish entirely. There are no dark trenches to retreat into, no shifting sands to bury oneself under, and no ancient rock formations to provide sanctuary. In this vast, open blue desert, vulnerability is absolute, and privacy is a luxury that nature simply does not permit. To exist in this illuminated world, a creature cannot rely on armor, heavy defensive shells, or the patient art of waiting in ambush. In the sunlit pastures of the open sea, the ultimate currency of life is pure, unadulterated velocity. The upper ocean does not forgive the slow, nor does it accommodate the hesitant. It is an arena built entirely for the fast, a domain where acceleration is a religion, and a single millisecond of delay marks the definitive boundary between a successful hunt and sudden starvation. Slicing through this bright blue glare like a living blade comes the undisputed tactical fighter jet of the shallow ocean, the sailfish. Measuring up to 10 feet from its sword-like bill to its crescent-shaped tail, this magnificent predator is an organism entirely micro-engineered for high-velocity warfare. Every line of its body, every texture of its skin, and every curve of its muscle fibers has been meticulously sculpted by millions of years of evolution to overcome the dense, suffocating resistance of water. When the sailfish detects a target, it folds its massive sail-like dorsal fin completely flat against its back, tucking its pelvic fins into specialized grooves along its belly to transform its silhouette into a flawless, aerodynamic arrow. Its long, hyper-rigid bill cuts through the water tension ahead, creating a pathway of reduced drag that allows the rest of its body to follow with near-zero friction. With powerful, rhythmic sweeps of its high aspect ratio tail, the sailfish can burst into a sprint that approaches 70 miles per hour, moving so rapidly that the human eye can barely register its trajectory before it leaves a trail of scattered bubbles in its wake. Yet, sprinting at such extreme velocities requires an immense, near unsustainable metabolic tax. To move through water at highway speeds, a warm-blooded muscle engine burns through energy reserves at a frantic, alarming rate. The sailfish's tissues consume oxygen with terrifying speed. Its temperature spikes, and its gills must strain massive volumes of water to keep its internal systems from overheating. It is a weapon designed for precision strikes, not prolonged wars of attrition. If a hunt drags on, if the prey manages to outmaneuver it for too long, the sailfish will inevitably succumb to severe lactic acid buildup, its muscles seizing from pure exhaustion. It cannot afford an inefficient chase. It cannot waste a single movement to guarantee that its high-speed sorties end in a kill. The sailfish has evolved a psychological weapon that is far more devastating than its physical speed alone. It has learned to weaponize the very light that surrounds it. The silver-blue flanks of the sailfish are a canvas of complex biological engineering. Deep within its skin layers lies a sophisticated matrix of specialized pigment cells called chromatophores, which are directly wired into the animal's sympathetic nervous system. In a state of rest, the sailfish drifts in a dull, muted shade of gray, blending imperceptibly into the ambient blue of the open ocean. But the moment the hunt begins, the animal's brain sends an electric pulse cascading across its skin. Instantly, its flanks erupt into a spectacular, flashing display of iridescent neon blues, metallic purples, and deep, shimmering golds. This sudden transformation is not an accidental byproduct of excitement. It is a calculated tactical disruption. As the sailfish charges into a tightly packed school of thousands of silver sardines, its body pulses and flashes with blinding waves of light like a strobe light in a dark room. To the sardines, whose primary defense relies on moving as a single, synchronized, reflective mass, these sudden bursts of changing color break their collective visual coordination. The dazzling patterns scramble their sensory input, shattering the illusion of the school's unity and causing individual baitfish to panic, break formation, and scatter into open water. The moment the school fractures, the sailfish rises its massive, towering sail fin, using it like a physical shield to herd the isolated prey, trapping them in a localized panic before using its bill to tap and stun them with surgical accuracy. But the true genius of the upper ocean's predatory matrix is not confined to the water column. In the endless plains of the Pacific, the most successful hunters do not operate in isolation. They look beyond their own biological borders to form alliances that span entirely different realms of existence. As the sailfish drapes the upper ocean in pulses of neon light and herds the panicking sardine schools higher and higher, the commotion sends a vibration rippling through the surface tension, echoing upward into the sky. From hundreds of feet in the air, a master of the wind currents catches the signal. Descending silently on a massive 12-foot wingspan is the Royal Albatross. This magnificent bird, capable of spending months at sea without ever touching dry land, has been tracking the shifting colors of the ocean from above. The albatross recognizes the flashing blue lights of the sailfish not as a threat, but as an invitation to an extraordinary cross-domain tactical blockade. What follows is an impeccable demonstration of unprompted multi-dimensional warfare. The sailfish attacks from the deep, driving the massive wall of silver sardines upward, using the flat barrier of the ocean's surface as a solid ceiling to pin the prey in place. The fish cannot dive, for the sailfish blocks the path below with its flashing skin and razor-sharp bill. Trapped against the air, the sardine school forms a dense, swirling ball of desperate energy. It is at this exact moment of maximum vulnerability that the sky enters the battle. The albatross tilts its great wings, locking its gaze on the silver matrix below, and drops out of the sky like a falling stone, plunging through the surface tension at tremendous speed. The bird uses its momentum to dive several meters deep, its razor-sharp beak snapping up the cornered fish from above, while the sailfish slashes through them from below. This is a flawless, asymmetric air-to-sea encirclement. Two entirely different creatures belonging to two completely separate branches of the evolutionary tree. One, a cold-blooded master of fluid dynamics, the other, a warm-blooded sovereign of the aerial thermal currents, work in unspoken instinctual harmony to conquer a chaotic environment. They have turned the physical geometry of the upper ocean into an inescapable prison. The sailfish uses the air above as a wall. The albatross uses the water below as a net. Together, they exploit the limits of their environment, transforming a simple hunt into a synchronized, multi-layered campaign where every escape route is systematically closed. As the sunlit hour reaches its peak, this high-stakes choreography repeats across the vast expanses of the epipelagic zone. It stands as a brilliant testament to the fact that, in the wide-open spaces of the Pacific, intelligence is not merely measured by the size of a brain or the strength of a jaw. True brilliance lies in the ability to read the matrix of the world around you, to adapt your very flesh to the shifting properties of light, and to bridge the gap between sky and sea to ensure your place at the apex of existence. To live in the open pastures of the epipelagic zone is to exist in a world defined by a beautiful, terrifying emptiness. In this vast blue desert, there are no geographical landmarks to guide the traveler, no coral reefs to offer shelter from the elements, no caves to seek refuge in, and no solid floor upon which a weary body can rest. Every creature that calls this boundary layer home is condemned by the laws of nature to a lifetime of perpetual, unceasing motion. To stop moving in this liquid void is to begin a slow, irreversible descent into the dark, crushing pressures of the lower strata. To stop moving is ultimately to die. This is the hydrodynamic arena of the Pacific, a colossal kingdom governed not by the features of the land, but by the relentless, unyielding laws of fluid physics, planetary geometry, and thermodynamics. When humans look out at the open ocean, the mind struggles to comprehend the sheer scale of the architecture before them. The Pacific is not merely a body of water. It is a massive, self-sustaining thermodynamic engine that drives the climate and life cycles of the entire planet. At this uppermost boundary, where the water meets the atmosphere, the ocean is wrapped in a complex web of rotating macrocurrents known as gyres, driven by the rotation of the Earth and the relentless friction of global trade winds. These immense planetary gyres move billions of gallons of water across tens of thousands of miles every single day. They act as giant, invisible conveyor belts, carving out massive liquid highways that cross the globe, carrying nutrients, heat, and life along highly defined, predictable routes. For a large pelagic predator, crossing these vast oceanic distances is not a simple matter of swimming from one point to another. It is a complex, high-stakes mathematical problem of energy conservation and aerodynamic efficiency. If a creature relies entirely on raw muscle power to propel itself across the open expanses of the Pacific, it will inevitably burn through its vital fat reserves long before it encounters its next scattered meal. In this unforgiving space, the true master of the arena is never the organism that fights the momentum of the ocean, but rather the one that learns to read its rhythms, align its anatomy with its forces, and allow the global conveyor belts to carry it across the world. To understand the intense physical pressures of this arena, one must first understand the unique properties of the medium itself. Water is a dense, stubborn master. It is roughly 800 times denser than air, meaning that any object moving through it faces an immediate, compounding wall of resistance that increases exponentially with speed. To double your velocity through water, you cannot simply double your energy output. You must increase it fourfold. To triple your speed, the power required spikes by a factor of 9. This unyielding physical law is what imposes a massive, devastating metabolic tax on the high-speed hunters of the shallow, sunlit zone. The apex sprinters of the afternoon, the sailfish, the tunas, and the mackerel are locked in a constant, exhausting trade-off. To maintain the high-velocity engines required to capture fast-moving prey in an illuminated world with no hiding places, their bodies must function at an extreme metabolic rate. Their hearts are massive, heavily muscled organs that pump blood under intense pressure. Their red muscle tissues are packed with iron-rich myoglobin to supply a constant, frantic stream of oxygen to their cells. They possess specialized heat exchange systems that keep their swimming muscles several degrees warmer than the surrounding water, transforming them into high-performance internal combustion engines of flesh and bone. Yet, this high-performance design comes at an alarming cost. These animals are effectively trapped on a metabolic treadmill. Because they burn energy at such a terrifying rate, they are perpetually only a few days away from starvation. They must consume massive amounts of prey just to fuel the energy required to hunt for their next meal. Their lives are a frantic, high-wire act, where a prolonged shortage of food will cause their highly tuned engines to burn through their own structural tissues, leading to a rapid, fatal system failure. They are the beautiful, tragic prisoners of their own speed, forced to run forever just to stay alive in a sunlit desert that offers no rest. To escape this metabolic curse, to survive the true expanse of the open Pacific without burning to ash from the inside out, requires a completely different relationship with the laws of physics. The true long-distance voyagers of this hydrodynamic arena do not fight the stubborn density of the water. They surrender to it, using the medium's own properties to achieve an almost effortless grace. Where the sprinters rely on raw, explosive kinetic energy, the masters of endurance rely on structural efficiency and the sublime art of passive fluid dynamics. Foremost among these structural geniuses are the pelagic sharks, organisms whose basic blueprint has remained virtually unchanged for over 400 million years. Unlike the bony fish, a shark possesses a skeleton carved entirely from cartilage, a material that is vastly lighter and far more flexible than bone, instantly reducing the animal's overall mass and structural weight. To solve the problem of gravity in a world with no floor, the shark introduces an extraordinary biochemical adaptation. Its massive liver, which can make up to 25% of its total body weight, is entirely saturated with squalene, a lightweight, low-density oil. Because this oil is significantly lighter than salt water, it grants the shark near-perfect neutral buoyancy. The animal does not need to waste precious muscular energy simply to prevent itself from sinking into the abyss. It can hang suspended in the water column, weightless and perfectly balanced, like a zeppelin floating in the atmosphere. With gravity effectively neutralized, the shark turns the dense resistance of the ocean into an active ally. Its long, hyper-rigid pectoral fins extend horizontally from its torso, locked out completely straight like the high aspect ratio wings of a long-range military glider. As the shark propels itself forward with slow, rhythmic, hypnotic sweeps of its heterocircle tail, the dense water passes over the curved surfaces of these pectoral wings, generating immediate hydrodynamic lift. By carefully adjusting the pitch and angle of these organic foils, the shark can ride the massive, rolling underwater thermals and macro currents of the Pacific gyres for thousands of miles, traveling across entire oceans while expending barely more energy than a human being takes to rest. Even at a microscopic level, the shark's surface is a masterpiece of fluid engineering designed to cheat the tax of friction. Its skin is not covered in smooth, slimy scales like a typical fish, but is instead wrapped in a dense, interlocking armor of millions of microscopic tooth-like structures known as dermal denticles. Each individual denticle is etched with tiny, parallel longitudinal ridges aligned precisely with the flow of the water. As the shark glides through the sea, these micro-grooves disrupt the natural tendency of water to form turbulent, swirling eddies against a moving object. Instead, they force the water to channel smoothly and rapidly along the contours of the body, reducing surface drag to near absolute zero. This microscopic architecture creates a boundary layer of fluid perfection, turning the very friction of the dense ocean into an extra source of forward propulsion. It is a design so mathematically flawless that modern human aerospace and naval engineers have spent decades attempting to replicate it, coating the hulls of Olympic racing boats and the wings of high-efficiency aircraft in synthetic shark skin to steal a fraction of its evolutionary brilliance. But the hydrodynamic arena of the Pacific is never a static stage. It is a fluid landscape that operates on a massive vertical elevator of temperature and light. Beneath the sunlit surface waves lies a sharp, invisible thermal boundary line known as the thermocline, a dramatic frontier where the warm, solar-heated upper water abruptly plummets into the dark, near-freezing currents of the deep ocean. During the bright hours of high noon, this boundary sits deep, pinning the cold, loving organisms down into the shadows and forcing the high-speed sprinters to hunt in the bright upper matrix. As the sun begins to tilt toward the western horizon, losing its golden grip on the water, the physics of the arena undergo a profound shift. The surface water cools, the thermocline begins to rise like a dark curtain, and the great light that fueled the high-velocity warfare of the afternoon begins to surrender to the incoming dark. The sprinters of the shallow sea, their frantic metabolic engines exhausted from the day's high-stakes sorties, are forced to slow their pace, retreating into a lower state of energy conservation. The air-to-sea alliances dissolve as the birds return to distant coastal cliffs. The rule of pure speed is coming to an end. The fading light signals a massive, planet-scale transition of power. As the upper stratum dims into a cold, twilight indigo, the arena prepares to welcome a completely different cast of characters. Creatures that do not possess the heavy muscle engines of the sailfish or the long pelagic wings of the shark, but instead rely on asymmetric warfare, absolute camouflage, and mechanical precision. To find them, we must leave the infinite, empty highways of the open blue, and move toward the crowded, chaotic labyrinth of the coastal fringes, where the battle for survival turns from a frantic race of speed into a dark war of pure cunning. Leaving behind the infinite, empty highways of the open blue, the vertical architecture of the Pacific shifts dramatically as it approaches the coastal fringes. Here, rising from the continental shelves like a sprawling, neon-drenched metropolis beneath the waves, sits the coral reef. To the casual observer, this shallow kingdom appears to be a paradise of unparalleled beauty, a tranquil sanctuary where delicate structures of living stone sway gently in the sunlit currents, and thousands of brilliantly colored species coexist in a peaceful, harmonious dance. But this aesthetic splendor is the ultimate ecological illusion. Beneath the breathtaking canvas of sapphire, emerald, and gold lies the most volatile, violent, and densely populated war zone on the planet. The coral reef is a crowded megalopolis locked in a state of perpetual siege, an arena of asymmetric duels where every crevice is a potential ambush point, every shadow hides a hungry mouth, and space is a premium worth killing for. In the open sea, survival was dictated by the macro-scale laws of fluid dynamics, a grand war of endurance, long pelagic wings, and high-velocity muscle engines. But within the tight, claustrophobic labyrinth of the reef, those macro weapons lose their efficacy. A 70-mile-per-hour sailfish cannot navigate the jagged, winding corridors of a coral maze. A multi-ton sperm whale cannot hunt within the shallow, sun-warmed lagoons. In this crowded theater of war, evolution completely reverses its strategy. It strips away the necessity for massive physical scale and instead invests its genius into the miniature, the precise, and the highly explosive. The weapons of the reef are not designed to conquer vast oceanic distances. They are engineered to settle arguments in a fraction of a millimeter, to shatter armor in a single heartbeat, and to rewrite the very laws of physics within a localized pocket of water. Tucked away in a dark, inconspicuous burrow at the base of a massive coral head sits the true master of this asymmetric battlefield. It is an animal that does not boast the terrifying silhouette of a shark or the massive intelligence of a cetacean, yet it possesses a kinetic power that leaves structural engineers and physicists speechless. This is the mantis shrimp, specifically the smasher ecotype, Odontodactylus ciliarus, measuring only a few inches in length and draped in a psychedelic coat of iridescent green, crimson, and electric blue. This small crustacean resembles a beautiful, harmless court jester of the seafloor. But inside its delicate, segmented torso lies a biological mechanical system that functions less like an animal muscle and more like a high-tech railgun. The mantis shrimp is the ultimate kinetic anomaly of the natural world. A creature that has evolved the ability to strike with the velocity of a heavy-caliber firearm, tearing through the stubborn density of the ocean with a force that literally shatters the rules of fluid mechanics. To understand the terrifying nature of the mantis shrimp's weaponry, one must first look at the fundamental limits of animal tissue. Muscle, by its very biological composition, has a physical speed limit. A nerve signal can only travel so fast. Muscle fibers can only contract at a set velocity before they reach their structural breaking point. If the mantis shrimp relied on the simple contraction of ordinary muscles to swing its hunting appendages, it would be no faster than a common crab or a garden-variety lobster capable of catching a slow worm. Perhaps, but entirely incapable of breaking through the heavily armored defenses of its neighbors. To bypass this biological speed barrier, the mantis shrimp does not attempt to make its muscles contract faster. Instead, it transforms its entire thoracic framework into an exquisite, high-capacity energy storage device, a biological crossbow of unparalleled efficiency. The hunting weapon of the smasher mantis shrimp consists of a pair of highly modified dactyl clubs, heavy, hyper-dense bludgeons reinforced with crystalline calcium phosphate and hydroxyapatite, the very mineral that gives human bones and teeth their structural strength. When the mantis shrimp spots an armored target, such as a thick-shelled clam, a heavily defended crab, or a predatory snail, it does not immediately strike. Instead, it enters a state of mechanical cocking. It engages a specialized internal skeletal latch system within its arm joints, locking the heavy dactyl clubs firmly in place against its chest. Once the latch is secure, the shrimp begins to contract its massive, highly developed flexor muscles. Because the arm is physically latched shut, these muscles cannot move the club. Instead, the enormous energy generated by the contraction is redirected inward, compressing a highly specialized saddle-shaped structure on the back of the appendage, known as a biological spring. This saddle-shaped structure functions as a hyper-efficient spring, storing massive quantities of potential energy without snapping or deforming. It is made of a unique combination of mineralized layers and flexible chitin, allowing it to act like a carbon fiber bow strung to its absolute limit. When the prey enters the kill zone, positioned a mere fraction of an inch away from the burrow entrance, the mantis shrimp releases the skeletal latch. Instantly, the compressed biological spring erupts. The stored energy is released not with the slow pull of an ordinary muscle, but in a catastrophic, instantaneous burst. The heavy dactyl clubs are launched forward with a staggering acceleration that exceeds 10,000 times the force of gravity, 10,000 G. This means that the tiny arm reaches its maximum velocity in less than 3 milliseconds, an interval of time so unimaginably brief that it is roughly 50 times faster than the blink of a human eye. As the dactyl club cuts through the water, it moves at a terminal velocity of over 50 miles per hour, transforming a fraction of an inch of empty space into a localized firing range. But it is at this exact moment of acceleration that the mantis shrimp stops acting like a simple animal and begins to manipulate the very fabric of fluid physics. Because water is an incredibly dense, heavy medium. Moving an object through it at 60 miles per hour in a thousandth of a second creates a profound hydrodynamic crisis. The forward face of the club pushes the water ahead of it with such immense violence that the water behind the club cannot flow fast enough to fill the empty space. As a direct result, the local water pressure drops precipitously, plunging far below the vapor pressure of liquid water. This dramatic, localized pressure drop tears the water molecules apart, creating a phenomenon known to naval engineers as a cavitation bubble. This is not a normal bubble filled with air or gas. It is a pocket of absolute vacuum, a tear in the fabric of the liquid world itself. As the dactyl club strikes the shell of the prey, delivering an initial impact force of up to 1,500 newtons, enough to shatter heavy industrial glass, the weaponized physics of the deep truly manifests. Immediately following the physical club, the vacuum-filled cavitation bubble collapses under the crushing weight of the surrounding ocean. When a cavitation bubble implodes, it does not disappear quietly. The surrounding water rushes inward to fill the void with such immense velocity that it creates an intense, localized shock wave. The physics of this collapse are so extreme that for a fraction of a microsecond, the temperature inside the imploding bubble spikes to a staggering 4,700 degrees Celsius. 4,700 degrees Celsius. This is a temperature that nearly matches the outer surface of the sun, accompanied by a brief, microscopic flash of light known as sonoluminescence. Within a microscopic pocket of the shallow Pacific, the mantis shrimp has literally weaponized the stars. The result of this cavitation phenomenon is a devastating dual-impact strike. Even if the target is fast enough to dodge the physical club by a millimeter, it cannot escape the trailing vacuum bubble. The subsequent implosion releases a secondary shockwave that hits the prey with nearly the exact same force as the original blow. A heavily armored crab, resting confidently behind a thick calcium carbonate shield, is subjected to a terrifying double punch. First, a physical hammer blow that fractures its outer defenses, followed immediately by a localized acoustic explosion that shatters its internal organs and tears its shell completely to pieces. Against this asymmetric weapon, millions of years of defensive evolution become utterly useless. Heavy shells, defensive spines, and calcified armor are transformed from fortresses into inescapable tombs, obliterated by a creature that uses fluid mechanics as a personal executioner. This is the kinetic anomaly of the coral megalopolis, an animal that has bypassed the biological limits of flesh and blood to construct a living railgun. For human naval engineers, cavitation is a destructive nightmare. A phenomenon that pits and destroys the heavy bronze propellers of nuclear submarines and cargo ships, tearing metal apart through pure mechanical wear. Yet the mantis shrimp has tamed this chaotic force, incorporating it into its daily hunting routine with flawless, calculated control. It is an extraordinary demonstration of how the crowded, high-stakes battlefields of the coastal fringes force life to abandon the traditional rules of scale and velocity. In the tight corridors of the reef, True brilliance is not found in the size of the animal, but in the precision of its engineering. The ability to compress the vast, crushing forces of the ocean into a microscopic point and release it with the devastating power of a cosmic event. If the explosive violence of the mantis shrimp demonstrates how the crowded battlefields of the coastal fringes can force life to weaponize the brutal laws of physics, a short journey across the reef reveals an entirely different, deeply astonishing dimension of the aquatic mind. Evolution within the coral megalopolis is not merely an arms race of escalating lethality, heavier armor, and hypervelocity shock waves. The pressures of a densely populated ecosystem do not only breed monsters, they breed artists. In the very same waters where kinetic railguns shatter calcium fortresses in a matter of milliseconds, nature introduces a profound counter-narrative, a demonstration that survival can be achieved not through the destruction of life, but through the sublime, painstaking creation of beauty. To find this artistic revolution, one must look away from the dramatic vertical towers of living stone and cast their eyes downward toward the vast, empty deserts of white sediment that lie at the fringes of the coral kingdom. At first glance, these shallow, sandy plains appear to be barren wastelands, devoid of interest, empty of shelter, and entirely secondary to the vibrant drama of the main reef structure. The water currents here sweep across a flat, featureless canvas of crushed shell and microscopic silica, shifting the grains in endless, random ripples. It is a vulnerable, exposed terrain, where a small animal has nowhere to hide from passing predators, and no natural fortresses to claim as its own. Yet, it is within this unpredictable, fluid desert that one of the most mathematically precise architectural marvels on Earth is constructed. For decades, divers and marine biologists swimming over these plains were left utterly mystified by the sudden appearance of vast, intricate circular patterns etched into the sea floor. Circular formations measuring over 7 feet in diameter, constructed out of symmetrical ridges, radiating grooves, and perfectly aligned valleys. They looked less like the work of an animal and more like sacred geometric crop circles designed by an alien intelligence. The architect behind these massive, mesmerizing masterpieces is not a giant creature, nor does it possess a complex, mammal-like brain. It is a tiny, solitary fish measuring barely 5 inches in length. The male white-spotted pufferfish, Torquegener albomaculosus. On its own, this small, muted brown fish appears entirely unremarkable, soft-bodied, slow-swimming, and possessing none of the physical weapons that command respect in the marine world. It has no claws to strike with, no hypervelocity bludgeons, and no majestic speed to outrun danger. If a predatory barracuda or a hunting shark passes overhead, the pufferfish's only defense is to swallow water, inflating its elastic stomach to transform itself into a clumsy, spiked ball that is difficult to swallow. It is an animal that exists on the very margins of safety, entirely vulnerable to the harsh currents of the open plain. Yet inside this unassuming 5-inch frame beats the heart of a master draftsman. A dedicated sculptor driven by an instinctual understanding of geometry, fluid dynamics, and aesthetic seduction. To understand why this tiny creature commits its entire existence to drawing lines in the desert, one must understand the absolute tyranny of reproduction in the crowded ocean. In a world where thousands of species are competing for the chance to pass their genetic legacy down to the next generation, a female pufferfish is a highly selective judge. She does not choose a mate based on simple proximity or aggressive dominance. She demands proof of genetic superiority, structural competence, and dedication. She requires a sanctuary, a flawless cradle, where her delicate, unfertilized eggs can be safely deposited and protected from the unrelenting ocean currents that threaten to sweep them away into oblivion. The male pufferfish cannot offer her a ready-made cave or a hidden crevice in the coral. Those prime territories have already been claimed by larger, more violent predators. If he is to win her favor, he must build a palace out of the very sand beneath his fins, constructing an architectural masterpiece from scratch through sheer, unceasing labor. The construction of this aquatic palace is a grueling, round-the-clock marathon that pushes the tiny male pufferfish to the absolute limits of its physical endurance. He has a window of only 7 to 9 days to complete the structure before the shifting ocean currents inevitably erode his work, requiring him to maintain a state of near-perpetual motion. The process begins with a single, invisible point in the featureless sand, the geometric center of his future empire. From this mental anchor, the pufferfish begins to chart a series of perfect concentric circles and radial spokes, using nothing but his own body as a living stylus and a microscopic surveyor's transit. He does not have a bird's eye view of his canvas. He cannot swim upward to inspect the symmetry of his lines, for to leave the sea floor is to lose his position against the moving water. He must construct the entire layout from a ground-level perspective, relying on a flawless spatial awareness encoded deep within his evolutionary blueprint. To carve the deep, radiating valleys that define the structure, the pufferfish aligns his body perpendicular to the outer boundary and drives himself inward toward the center, his belly dragging through the sediment. He utilizes his pectoral and caudal fins like precise hydraulic earth movers, fanning the water with a frantic, rhythmic intensity to lift the lighter, finer sand grains and deposit them into raised ridges. He repeats this process dozens, hundreds, and eventually thousands of times, moving systematically around the perimeter circle, degree by degree. Each pass must be executed with identical force and at an identical angle. A single errant sweep of his tail or a momentary lapse in kinetic output would distort the symmetry of the ridge, ruining the geometric perfection that his future mate demands. As the days blur together, the architecture begins to take shape. The final structure is a multi-layered geometric wonder, a central basin of fine, smooth sediment surrounded by an outer ring of up to 28 radiating ridges and valleys that look like the petals of a massive, computerized flower. But this design is far from a purely decorative exercise. The pufferfish is not just an artist. He is a master of fluid engineering who has discovered how to manipulate the boundary layers of the ocean. The specific height of the ridges and the precise depth of the intersecting valleys are meticulously calculated to interact with the predictable macro currents sweeping across the open plain. When the horizontal water currents strike the outer edges of the circle, the radiating valleys act as natural channels, funneling the moving water inward and forcing it into a state of aerodynamic deceleration. As the water approaches the central basin, the structural geometry forces the current to disperse upward and outward, leaving the very center of the circle in a state of near-perfect, tranquil stillness. By sculpting the sand, the tiny pufferfish has successfully constructed a hydrodynamic shield, a pocket of absolute calm in the middle of a turbulent sea, engineered to keep delicate eggs from being swept away by the current. To add the final artistic touches to his creation, the pufferfish becomes a curator of the sea floor. He swims out into the surrounding desert, searching for contrasting textures to break the monotony of the white sand. He selectively gathers fragments of dark, polished shells, unique pieces of calcified coral, and small, colorful pebbles, carrying them back to his fortress one by one in his mouth. He does not scatter these items randomly. He places them meticulously along the crests of the inner ridges, decorating the peaks of his sandy ziggurat with the care of a gallery curator preparing a major exhibition. This decoration serves as a visual contrast, highlighting the depth of his valleys and drawing the eye directly toward the smooth, pristine sanctuary at the very heart of the geometric matrix. When the construction phase finally draws to a close, the male pufferfish retreats to the center of his creation, his body exhausted and his fins frayed from days of non-stop labor. He waits in the middle of his quiet sanctuary, a tiny creator sitting at the heart of a grand geometric universe. It is now that the ultimate critic arrives. Drawn by the distinct hydrodynamic silhouette and the contrasting visual patterns of the decorated ridges, A female white-spotted pufferfish hovers over the edge of the masterpiece. She does not enter immediately. She floats above the structure like an art critic assessing a grand installation, her large, expressive eyes scanning the symmetry of the lines, the height of the ridges, and the precise distribution of the shell fragments. This is a high-stakes evaluation, where the margin for error is zero. If the circles are warped, if the valleys are uneven, or if the central basin fails to provide the necessary calm water, she will simply turn away, leaving the male to watch his hard work erode into nothingness under the next tidal shift. The male begins a desperate courtship dance within the center of the ring, stirring up the ultra-fine sediment to demonstrate the pristine softness of the cradle he has sculpted. If she is satisfied with the mathematical precision of his design, she descends into the central basin, pressing her body against the smooth sand to deposit her eggs, which the male instantly fertilizes. The moment the spawning is complete, the female departs, leaving the male behind to guard the sanctuary until the eggs hatch a few days later. As the young drift off into the planktonic currents, the ocean waves inevitably smooth out the sand, erasing the sacred geometry and returning the plain to a blank canvas. The artistic architecture of the white-spotted pufferfish represents a profound philosophical pivot in our understanding of the marine mind. For centuries, human science assumed that complex, structured intelligence was the exclusive privilege of large, highly social mammals with massive brains, such as primates, elephants, and cetaceans. We believed that small, cold-blooded fish were driven by nothing more than simple, automated reflexes, basic survival algorithms, encoded to find food and flee from predators. Yet, this tiny 5-inch creature shatters that anthropocentric bias completely. Within its microscopic neurological network lies the ability to perform complex geometric calculations, to translate abstract concepts of symmetry and proportion into physical reality, and to manipulate the invisible physics of fluid dynamics through pure, artistic labor. This is intelligence expressed not as weaponized kinetic energy or a violent display of apex dominance, but as architectural seduction and structural harmony. It proves that the intense, crowded pressures of the Pacific's ecosystems do not merely force life to invent more devastating ways to destroy. They inspire life to discover breathtaking ways to create. In the grand library of the ocean, the pufferfish's sand circle stands as a beautiful monument to the power of adaptation. A silent, geometric declaration that sometimes the most successful weapon in the eternal struggle for survival is a profound and beautiful understanding of design. As the tropical warmth of the coral megalopolis fades into the great sweeping currents of the North Pacific, the nature of survival shifts from localized asymmetric warfare to a grand, planet-scale test of endurance and memory. The ocean is not merely a collection of isolated habitats. It is a system of massive, interconnected liquid highways. Across these cold, nutrient-rich marine avenues, billions of creatures are locked in a state of perpetual migration, traveling thousands of miles in pursuit of food, warmth, and the survival of their species. But of all the grand pilgrimages that define the vast expanse of the Pacific, none is more epic, more biographically tragic, or more ecologically profound than the final, doomed loft of the Pacific salmon. This is a journey that transcends the boundaries between the marine and terrestrial worlds, a relentless, one-way march that transforms a simple biological cycle into a sweeping, multi-layered drama of life, death, and absolute sacrifice. For years, the salmon exists as a ghost of the open sea. As a silver, high-velocity predator, it roams the vast subarctic pastures of the North Pacific, from the icy coasts of Alaska to the deep, frigid currents of the Bering Sea. In this rich marine environment, it thrives, feeding greedily on krill, squid, and smaller fish. its flesh turning a rich, vibrant crimson from the pigments of its prey. In the open ocean, the salmon is an animal of supreme physical grace, sleek, powerful, and perfectly adapted to the endless blue highways. It has no knowledge of boundaries, no memory of land, and no contact with the fresh water of its youth. Yet, deep within the cellular matrix of its brain, a biological clock is ticking away, counting down the days, the hours, and the miles toward a cataclysmic genetic awakening. The trigger for this awakening is as ancient as the ocean itself. When the precise internal countdown reaches its 0 hour, a massive surge of hormones floods the salmon's nervous system, instantly overriding every primal survival mechanism it possesses. The urge to feed, the urge to rest, the urge to seek safety from predators, all are utterly obliterated, replaced by a single, terrifying, and all-consuming command: return. The salmon must leave the rich, supportive pastures of the open sea and navigate its way back across thousands of miles of trackless ocean toward the exact coastal estuary, the exact river mouth, and the exact gravel stream where its life began years before. To accomplish this staggering feat of navigation across an empty ocean with no landmarks, the salmon relies on a multi-layered sensory matrix that borders on the miraculous. In the open sea, it reads the weak, invisible lines of the Earth's geomagnetic field, using an internal organic compass to steer its course toward the coast. But as it approaches the continental shelf, where the massive saltwater highways fracture into 1,000 different freshwater veins, the salmon engages its ultimate navigation weapon, its extraordinary, hyper-specialized olfactory memory. When the salmon was a tiny, fragile smolt leaving its birth stream years ago, its developing brain recorded a permanent, immutable chemical fingerprint of that specific water. It memorized the distinct scent of the local soil, the unique chemical signature of the decaying leaves, the specific mineral balance of the rocks, and the biological aroma of the resident mosses. This process, known as chemical imprinting, creates a permanent olfactory map that remains dormant throughout its adult life in the sea. Now, as a fully grown adult returning from the deep, the salmon smells the ocean currents, sorting through millions of complex chemical signals until it catches the single familiar molecule that spells the way home. It is a navigational system so precise that a salmon can detect a single drop of its home stream water diluted in millions of gallons of open ocean, using a chemical memory to guide its path through a labyrinth of water. The moment the salmon crosses the invisible boundary separating the saltwater estuary from the fresh water of the river, its body enters a stage of profound, irreversible destruction. Fresh water is a toxic environment for a marine creature. The sudden drop in salinity disrupts the delicate osmotic balance of its cells, triggering a cascade of radical anatomical changes. Because its digestive tract is designed solely for the chemistry of the open sea, the salmon's stomach shuts down completely. It will never eat again. For the remainder of its existence, every movement of its fins, every leap over a waterfall, and every heartbeat must be fueled entirely by the fat reserves and muscle tissues it accumulated during its years in the ocean. It is literally burning its own body as fuel, consuming its internal organs from the inside out to power its final journey. As it moves further upstream, away from the tides, the salmon undergoes a terrifying physical metamorphosis. Its sleek, silver marine armor vanishes, replaced by a deep, blood-red coloration that mirrors the tragic nature of its march. In the males, the jaws warp into a dramatic, hooked beak lined with large, menacing teeth, and a prominent hump erupts on their backs. Physical changes designed for aggressive, territorial duels over the spawning grounds ahead. But this new, vibrant appearance is a deceptive mask. Beneath the crimson skin, the salmon's internal systems are actively decaying. Its immune system collapses, its scales begin to slough off, and fungal infections take root across its flesh. The salmon is a living ghost, a creature actively dying while driving itself forward with a frantic, desperate energy. This decaying vanguard must now face the brutal physical gauntlet of the river architecture. The river is not a passive highway. It is a violent, downhill cascade of kinetic energy, a series of churning rapids, shallow gravel bars, and vertical waterfalls, designed by geology to push everything backward toward the sea. To advance even a single mile, the salmon must swim directly against this crushing momentum, fighting for every inch of progress. When it encounters a vertical waterfall, it cannot crawl or climb. It must position itself in the turbulent pool at the base of the falls, coil its deteriorating muscle engine, and launch its body completely out of the water, leaping up to 10 feet into the air to clear the crest of the rocks. Many fail on the first attempt, their bodies smashed against the jagged stones, only to fall back into the pool, realign their focus, and leap again and again, until they either succeed or die of sheer physical exhaustion. But the physical violence of the river is only half the gauntlet. The annual return of billions of nutrient-rich salmon is a planetary alarm clock that awakens the entire terrestrial ecosystem. Along the shallow rapids and at the base of the waterfalls, the apex predators of the landscape are waiting. Grizzly bears, having spent the winter months depleting their fat reserves, gather along the riverbanks in dense concentrations. They understand the geometry of the river perfectly. They stand directly in the path of the waterfalls, waiting for the salmon to leap directly into their open jaws. For the salmon, this is a terrifying, inescapable lottery of death. They must swim through a forest of claws and teeth, their brothers and sisters torn apart beside them, while they drive themselves forward through the blood-stained water, driven by a genetic command that knows no fear. Against all mathematical odds, through a forest of claws, teeth, and crushing waterfalls, a fraction of the vanguard finally reaches the finish line. These are the shallow, clear headwaters, the quiet gravel beds where the water runs cool and the shadows of the forest canopy offer a brief, fleeting moment of peace. Here, in the very same pools where they hatched years ago, the journey reaches its emotional and genetic climax. The female uses her tail to scoop out a shallow nest in the clean gravel, a cradle known as a red. With her final ounces of physical energy, she deposits thousands of vibrant orange eggs into the stones, which the male instantly coats in a cloud of milt. The moment the eggs are covered, the genetic clock that has driven them across oceans and up rivers strikes its absolute zero. The hormonal fire that fueled their impossible march abruptly burns out, leaving behind nothing but the cold reality of biological exhaustion. Within days of spawning, a profound, eerie silence falls over the river. The salmon, having completely burned through their own fat, muscles, and internal organs, simply lose the strength to fight the current. They drift backward into the quiet eddies, their fins giving one last, feeble flutter before they die. This is the post-spawning mass death, a phenomenon known as semmelparity. For miles, the riverbanks and gravel bars become covered in a blanket of crimson and white bodies. To the human eye, it looks like a scene of unmitigated tragedy, a senseless slaughter where an entire generation is wiped out in a matter of days. But in the grand design of the Pacific ecosystem, this mass death is not an ending. It is a spectacular, planet-scale resurrection. The open Pacific Ocean is a rich, dense treasury of rare marine nutrients, while the cold, temperate rainforests of the coast are chronically nutrient-poor, starving for vital elements like nitrogen and phosphorus. By traveling upstream to die, the salmon act as a massive, living bridge of chemistry, carrying millions of tons of deep-sea fertilizer directly into the heart of the terrestrial world. The decaying bodies are torn apart by eagles, foxes, and wolves, who carry the flesh deep into the woods. What the animals do not eat is absorbed directly into the soil. Isotopic studies have revealed that the ancient towering trees of the Pacific Northwest, the giant redwoods, Sitka spruces, and Douglas firs, draw up to 80% of their nitrogen directly from the bodies of decayed salmon. The very trees that shade the river are built out of the ocean's silver travelers. The salmon literally feed the forest that protects their children, ensuring that when the next generation hatches from the gravel months later, they will find a rich, supportive habitat waiting for them. This is the profound, cyclical intelligence of the Pacific salmon, a strategy of survival based not on the longevity of the individual, but on the absolute, calculated sacrifice of the self for the preservation of the whole. It is a story that completely rewrites our understanding of boundaries, proving that the ocean does not end at the shoreline. Through the blood-red matrix of the salmon's journey, the deep blue sea reaches hundreds of miles inland, carving its legacy into the rings of ancient trees and the genetic memories of generations yet unborn. In the Grand Library of the Pacific, the Red River of Death stands as a monumental reminder that in the mathematics of nature, life is never lost, it is merely transformed. While the tragic march of the Pacific salmon binds the chemistry of the deep sea to the roots of ancient terrestrial forests, a completely different kind of navigation master commands the open, trackless plains of the wider ocean. To travel up a river requires an unyielding muscle engine and a map written in scent. But to navigate the featureless, deep blue corridors of the open Pacific, where the water stretches out for thousands of miles in every direction without a single coast, reef, or current shift to mark the way, requires a sensory apparatus that borders on the science of the impossible. In this infinite, liquid void, space is an absolute tyrant. A creature that loses its heading by even a fraction of a degree will drift off into a barren marine desert, far away from the shifting currents that carry its food. To conquer this mapless empire, evolution has constructed a navigator that does not look at the world through ordinary eyes, but instead reads the invisible, primordial forces of the planet itself. Sailing through these deep, sapphire voids like a ghostly vessel is one of the most enigmatic and visually striking silhouettes in the history of life. The great hammerhead shark, Sperm Whale, measuring up to 20 feet in length and possessing a heavy, muscular torso. This apex predator is instantly recognizable by the bizarre lateral extension of its skull, a flat, hammer-shaped structure known to science as a cephalofoil. For over a century, evolutionary biologists viewed this strange head as a bizarre design flaw, an anatomical eccentricity that seemed to defy the sleek hydrodynamic perfection seen in other pelagic sharks. They questioned why nature would take a flawless ambush machine and deform its skull into a wide, awkward wing. But as modern marine biophysics has advanced, this historical mystery has been utterly shattered. The cephalofoil is not a mistake. It is the ultimate sensory masterstroke, an organic quantum compass engineered to read the hidden energetic architecture of the globe. To understand the sheer necessity of the hammerhead's sensory matrix, one must first confront the terrifying reality of pelagic navigation. The open ocean offers no signposts, no valleys to follow, and no celestial constants when storms blot out the sun. For an ordinary animal, traveling across these trackless blue deserts is equivalent to walking through a dense fog with no horizon. Yet, every single year, thousands of great hammerheads gather along highly defined underwater migration superhighways, traveling thousands of miles with a precision that rivals the most advanced military global positioning systems. They do not drift aimlessly. They march in straight, unswerving lines across the deep, moving from the shallow coastal nurseries of the Western Pacific toward the deep volcanic seamounts of the open sea. They are following an invisible grid, a map mapped directly along the Earth's geomagnetic lines, carved into the very fabric of the oceanic crust by the shifting plates of the planet. The secret to reading this invisible energetic grid lies within the microscopic architecture of the hammerhead's flattened skull. Across the entire underside of the wide cephalofoil lies a sprawling, dense network of thousands of tiny, jelly-filled pores, known as the ampullae of Lorenzini. While all sharks possess these electroreceptors, the hammerhead's bizarrely stretched head acts as a massive sensory wing, vastly increasing the surface area available for these pores and spreading them out like a wide-angle radar array on a modern military surveillance aircraft. This structural separation grants them a form of directional, stereoscopic electromagnetic vision. By comparing the minute differences in electrical intensity between the left and right tips of its wide skull, the hammerhead can instantly determine the exact orientation of an invisible energy field, navigating the pitch-black darkness of the deep sea through pure quantum perception. These tiny, gel-filled tubes are so intensely sensitive that they can detect an electrical field as faint as 0.5 billionth of a volt per square centimeter, a sensory threshold so unimaginably precise that it allows the shark to pick up the microscopic electrical current generated by the muscle contractions or heartbeat of a tiny fish buried deep beneath the sand. But as the hammerhead leaves the coastal shallows and voyages out over the deep ocean trenches, its electroreceptors tune into a much grander planetary frequency. Deep beneath the liquid highways of the Pacific lies the Ring of Fire, a massive, volatile network of active tectonic plates, deep-sea trenches, and towering underwater volcanic ridges. As these volcanic mountain ranges cooled over millions of years, the iron-rich basaltic lava hardened, aligning itself permanently with the polarity of the Earth's magnetic field. This geological process leaves behind a permanent physical imprint, a series of intense magnetic anomalies and invisible electronic ridges carved into the ocean floor, like a raised map of guiding lines. As the great hammerhead swims across the mapeless blue void, thousands of feet above the actual sea floor, its wide cephalofoil continuously scans this hidden volcanic grid. The movement of the shark's highly conductive body through the Earth's magnetic lines acts exactly like a copper wire passing through a magnetic field in an electrical generator. It induces a tiny, localized electric current within the gel of the ampullae of Lorenzini. By analyzing these minute, self-generated currents, the hammerhead can read the contours of the volcanic ridges far below, using them as a physical highway map to guide its journey across the empty ocean. It is a form of navigation that directly bridges the gap between animal biology and quantum mechanics, turning the entire planet into a glowing electronic guide. By day, these invisible electronic highways guide the hammerheads toward specific monumental destinations, the isolated seamounts of the open Pacific. Here, rising abruptly from the abyssal plains like jagged underwater towers, these submerged volcanoes create a dramatic intersection of currents. It is around these volcanic peaks that the solitary nature of the great hammerhead undergoes a shocking transformation. Gathered in the hundreds, they form massive, swirling schools that cruise silently around the basalt walls. For decades, marine biologists were left stunned by this behavior. Sharks are notoriously solitary predators, yet here they were, moving in flawless, silent formations that mirrored the complex social structures of higher mammals. This daytime gathering is a sophisticated ritual of social hierarchy and communication. Within these massive vertical schools, the larger, dominant females claim the prime positions at the center of the matrix, using subtle body tilts and head sweeps to assert their rank over the smaller individuals. It is a quiet, highly organized assembly where social connections are reinforced without a single drop of blood being spilled. But as the last rays of sunlight fade from the upper stratum, the social matrix abruptly dissolves. The shifting of the light acts as a silent alarm. The massive school breaks formation, and individual hammerheads disperse into the surrounding black water to hunt alone, turning their wide cephalofoil radars back toward the seafloor. By night, the hammerhead's quantum compass transforms from a long-range navigation map into a lethal tactical sensor, swimming just inches above the dark sand flats at the base of the seamounts. The shark swings its wide head back and forth in a sweeping motion that closely resembles a human technician using a metal detector on a beach. It is searching for its primary, highly dangerous prey, the stingray. The stingray is a master of camouflage, burying its flat body deep beneath the sediment and holding its breath to remain entirely invisible to ordinary eyes. But it cannot hide from the quantum radar of the cephalofoil. Even when completely covered by sand, the ray's nervous system continues to emit a faint, unavoidable electrical field. The hammerhead picks up the signal, pinpoints the exact coordinates of the buried target, and strikes with absolute certainty, using the flat edge of its hammer-like head to physically pin the thrashing ray against the sea floor before disabling its venomous barb. The great hammerhead shark stands as a monumental testament to the sheer, unimaginable depth of the oceanic mind, a creature that has literally evolved a shape to read the invisible forces of the cosmos. Yet, this ancient quantum navigator is currently facing a catastrophic existential crisis. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the great hammerhead is now hovering on the absolute brink of extinction, listed as critically endangered. The very sensory apparatus that has allowed them to conquer the vast expanses of the Pacific for millions of years offers absolutely no protection against the modern industrial networks of the human world. They are captured by the millions for the global shark fin trade, their bodies stripped of their fins and tossed back into the ocean to suffocate. Furthermore, the rising tide of electromagnetic pollution from deep-sea internet cables and offshore industrial operations is beginning to distort the subtle volcanic grids they rely on for survival, blinding their quantum compasses and leaving them stranded in a changing world. In the Grand Library of the Pacific, the hammerhead is a living masterpiece of biophysics, a silent guardian of the ancient volcanic highways. To lose them is to lose a direct, beautiful connection to the energetic heartbeat of the planet itself, a tragic erasure of an intelligence that learned to read the universe long before humanity ever learned to look at the stars. Leaving the vast, mapless blue highways of the upper strata behind, the journey downward crosses an invisible, definitive frontier at a depth of roughly 3,000 feet. The last, desperate photons of solar energy are completely extinguished by the dense, suffocating weight of the ocean. This is the bathypelagic zone, the midnight layer, a colossal kingdom of permanent, unyielding darkness that extends downward into the deep trenches of the planet. In this crushing expanse, the rules of life that governed the sunlit surface and the vibrant coral megalopolis are utterly annihilated. Space here is not merely vast. It is an infinite, freezing void where temperatures hover just above absolute zero, and the hydrostatic pressure shifts from a heavy weight into a brutal, destructive force of several tons per square inch. It is an environment of total sensory deprivation, an empty desert where food is so scarce that an organism might swim for months without ever encountering another living soul. To exist in this permanent Huanguk, life has been forced to strip away the traditional frameworks of biology, evolving adaptations that border on psychological horror and science fiction. In the upper ocean, competition was a race of speed, vision, and tactical coordination. But in this midnight realm, survival is a war against emptiness itself. The greatest threat to an animal in the deep abyss is not the teeth of a superior predator, but the crushing psychological probability of starving to death in the dark, or drifting forever in isolation without ever finding a mate. To conquer this absolute vacuum, evolution does not invest in high-performance muscle engines or elegant geometric artistry. Instead, it breeds entities that look like the discarded nightmares of the surface world creatures that have turned anatomical distortion into a highly refined science. Drifting silently through this cold, black void is the grotesque crown jewel of the abyss, the deep-sea anglerfish, specifically the humpback anglerfish, Melanocetus johnsonii. Known colloquially as the kakwi, or devilfish. This creature possesses a silhouette that seems entirely incompatible with the traditional aesthetics of nature. Its body is a soft, flabby, jelly-like mass, devoid of a rigid skeletal structure to save precious calcium in a mineral-starved desert. Its face is dominated by an enormous, cavernous mouth lined with long, translucent, needle-sharp teeth that curve inward like the bars of a prison cell. These teeth are hyper-flexible, folding backward to allow prey to slide effortlessly down its throat, but locking firmly in place if the victim attempts to struggle outward. Because a meal may only appear once every few weeks, the anglerfish cannot afford to be a selective hunter. Its stomach is a highly elastic, stretchable pouch capable of expanding to accommodate prey that is literally twice its own physical size. But the most famous weapon in the anglerfish's tactical arsenal is the escape. A highly modified dorsal fin ray that acts as an organic fishing rod extending directly from its forehead. In a world where light is dead, the anglerfish manufactures its own illumination, turning the darkness into a deadly theatrical trap. The tip of the ischia houses a specialized bulb filled with billions of bioluminescent bacteria, locked in a state of mutualistic symbiosis with the fish. The anglerfish controls the intensity and pulse rate of this living light by carefully regulating the supply of oxygen traveling through the blood vessels of the rod. To a hungry, wandering organism in the empty void, this faint, dancing blue-green glow resembles a tiny, swimming crustacean or a fragile jellyfish, a solitary beacon of hope in a terrifying desert. But as the victim swims closer, lured by the deceptive promise of sustenance, the cavernous jaws of the devilfish snap shut in a fraction of a millisecond, sealing its fate in the dark. Yet, the brilliant horror of the anglerfish's design extends far beyond its weaponized fishing rod or its expandable stomach. The true evolutionary masterpiece of this species lies hidden within an extreme, grotesque solution to a much deeper existential crisis: reproduction in the infinite dark, in a vast, trackless void, where individual anglerfish are scattered like single grains of sand across a desert. The probability of a mature male encountering a mature female during their brief reproductive windows is mathematically close to zero. If the anglerfish followed the traditional mating rituals of the upper ocean, swimming in pairs, searching for spawning aggregations, or defending territories, the entire species would succumb to extinction within a single generation. To cheat these impossible odds, nature has completely dismantled the conventional concept of gender dynamics, implementing a reproductive strategy known as sexual parasitism. To understand the sheer extremity of this strategy, one must first examine the shocking anatomical divergence between the sexes, a phenomenon known as extreme sexual dimorphism. The monstrous, glowing hunter with the needle-sharp teeth and expandable stomach is exclusively female. The male anglerfish, by contrast, is a pathetic, microscopic ghost of an organism, measuring barely a fraction of an inch in length, frequently less than 1/10 the physical size of his female counterpart. The male possesses no glowing lure, no cavernous jaws, and no functioning digestive tract. He cannot hunt, nor can he feed himself in the open water. He is born into the pitch-black abyss, with a body that is completely hollow, containing only 3 essential organs: an enormous pair of highly sensitive nostrils, a massive set of specialized panoramic eyes, optimized to detect the faintest flash of light, and a pair of oversized testes. He is a biological heat-seeking missile, a fragile entity whose entire lifespan is measured in a matter of days before he starves to death. Driven by a frantic, desperate mandate to find a female before his energy reserves run out. Guided by his hyper-developed nostrils, the tiny male swims to the freezing void, sniffing the water for the distinct, highly concentrated pheromone trail emitted by a mature female. When he draws closer, his oversized eyes lock onto the distinct, pulsing bioluminescence of her glowing forehead lure. He approaches her not as a suitor, but as a desperate refugee seeking salvation from the empty dark. He swims toward her massive, lumbering bulk and, using a set of specialized hook-like teeth located at the very tip of his snout, bites savagely into a soft, flabby belly. He will never let go. This initial, desperate bite marks the definitive end of his independent existence, triggering a catastrophic chemical reaction that permanently rewrites the boundaries of animal anatomy. The moment the male's tiny jaws lock into the female's flesh, his body releases a wave of specialized enzymes that digest the skin of both organisms at the point of contact. This is not an act of predation, but a profound, horrific cellular reconciliation. The tissues of the two individual fish melt and fuse together, closing the gap between them until their respective skins become a single, continuous layer. But the symbiosis digs much deeper than the surface. The blood vessels of the male grow outward, weaving directly into the circulatory system of the female. Their veins and arteries lock together, creating an organic plumbing network that connects their hearts. From this moment on, the male loses the ability to breathe or sustain his own cells. He is fed directly by the nutrients, oxygen, and hormones flowing through the female's blood. He becomes a literal extension of her own body, a new organ attached to her flank. With his survival guaranteed by the female's bloodstream, the male's body enters a phase of total anatomical dissolution because he no longer needs to see, navigate, or digest food. The laws of evolutionary efficiency begin to systematically dismantle his anatomy. His oversized eyes glaze over, wither, and turn completely blind. His massive nostrils, which once tracked pheromones through the abyss, atrophy into useless pits. His brain, his heart, his stomach, and his liver shrink and dissolve away into nothingness, reabsorbed by the very blood that feeds him. Within weeks, the male is stripped of everything that once defined him as an independent animal. He is reduced to a small, featureless, fleshy bump protruding from the female's abdomen. A living, breathing sperm bank completely devoid of a self. For the remainder of the female's long life in the deep trenches, she carries this genetic cargo wherever she travels, whenever her body registers the precise environmental cues that signal the 0 hour for spawning. Her nervous system sends an immediate chemical message cascading through her bloodstream. This hormonal signal travels through the shared circulatory system, bypassing her own organs and entering the remaining tissue of the fused male. Instantly, his highly developed testes respond, releasing a cloud of sperm directly into the water column at the exact moment the female releases her eggs. The male has no choice, no thought, and no independent awareness of the event. He has traded his eyes, his brain, his organs, and his identity for a guaranteed seat at the grand table of genetic survival. The horrific symbiosis of the deep-sea anglerfish represents the ultimate, absolute boundary of evolutionary adaptation, a relationship that shatters our terrestrial definitions of individuality and love. In the comfortable, sunlit spaces of the upper world, reproduction is a temporary intersection between two distinct lives. But in the permanent Huanuk of the bathypelagic zone, where space is infinite and isolation is an absolute law, survival demands total self-obliteration. The male anglerfish does not merely defend his mate or provide for her. He surrenders his very anatomy, dissolving his individual existence into hers, to ensure that their shared bloodline can endure. Within a desert of permanent night. In the grand, silent library of the Pacific Abyss, the devilfish stands as a haunting, beautiful monument to the raw power of existence. A proof that when confronted with the terrifying vacuum of a trackless void, life will willingly destroy the self just to guarantee that life itself does not come to an end. While the weaponized horror of the deep-sea anglerfish demonstrates how life can conquer the absolute vacuum of the abyss through terrifying anatomical distortion and self-obliteration, another resident of the midnight layer offers a completely counterintuitive masterstroke of survival. To exist in a permanent desert where food is a rare luxury, the devilfish chose the path of escalating lethality. engineering weaponized light traps, needle-sharp cages of teeth, and a reproductive system based on bodily fusion. But evolution is never a single, narrow highway. Directly alongside these monstrous predators, inhabiting the very same ink-black currents of the bathypelagic zone, drifts an animal that has achieved global success by completely rejecting the mechanics of violence. This is a creature that does not hunt, does not kill, and does not compete. To survive the extreme starvation of the deep, it has executed the ultimate evolutionary retreat, choosing to become a cosmic garbage collector, living entirely on the microscopic debris of the world above. Floating in the cold, silent currents between 3,000 and 5,000 feet deep is a relic of prehistory whose name evokes an image of gothic dread: the vampire squid. Vampiroteuthis infernalis, which literally translates from the Latin as the vampire squid from hell. When early 20th century marine expeditions first hauled this animal up from the deep trenches of the Pacific, scientists were struck with a sense of morbid fascination. Measuring roughly a foot in length, the animal possesses a gelatinous body draped in a rich, dark, velvet black or deep crimson skin. Its most striking features are a pair of massive, unblinking, spherical eyes that glow with a cold, intense sapphire blue. Eyes that are structurally the largest relative to body size in the entire animal kingdom. Connecting its 8 arms is a thick, highly flexible web of skin that acts like a dark, billowing cloak, lined on the inside with rows of soft, fleshy spines known as cirri. The visual architecture of the vampire squid screams of a highly predatory, bloodthirsty lifestyle, as if it were an active demon designed to hunt down fast-moving prey in the dark. For decades, textbook science grouped this creature with the true squids and octopuses, assuming it was a highly active, aggressive hunter that used its dark cloak to envelop victims before tearing them apart with its sharp beak. Its dark coloration, its glowing blue eyes, and its dramatic folding web all seemed to align with the traditional frameworks of marine predation. But as modern deep-sea submersibles equipped with high-definition cameras began to observe the vampire squid in its natural habitat, marine biologists were left entirely stunned. The animal's name is the ultimate biological misnomer. The vampire squid is not a vampire, nor is it a true squid. It is the sole surviving member of an ancient independent order of cephalopods that split away from modern squids and octopuses over 200 million years ago. And its lifestyle is a beautiful, radical act of absolute pacifism. To understand the profound genius of the vampire squid's survival strategy, one must look at the specific chemical environment it has chosen to colonize. It resides in a distinct vertical layer of the Pacific known as the Oxygen Minimum Zone, OMZ. In this highly oppressive stratum, the concentration of dissolved oxygen plummets to near zero levels. A chemical barrier so severe that it acts as an invisible wall for almost all high-performance marine life. Active predators like tunas, billfish, and even standard deep-sea sharks cannot cross into this zone. Their highly demanding muscle engines would instantly suffocate from the lack of oxygen. By choosing to live in this hypoxic wasteland, the vampire squid has effectively escaped the curse of competition. It has retreated to a fortress where no one can follow, a sanctuary of silence where it faces absolutely no threat from the apex predators of the upper world. But this sanctuary comes with a devastating catch. To live in a world with no oxygen, you must abandon the energy required to hunt. To adapt to this oxygen-starved sanctuary, the vampire squid has systematically dialed down its metabolic engine to the lowest possible setting. It possesses blood containing an incredibly high concentration of hemocyanin, the copper-based protein that binds oxygen far more efficiently than iron-based hemoglobin, allowing its tissues to strip every single molecule of gas from the suffocating water. It does not waste precious energy swimming with powerful jet propulsion like its surface-dwelling cousins. Instead, it glides through the black currents using 2 paddle-like fins on its mantle, moving with the slow, effortless grace of a ghost. Because its muscles are soft, watery, and completely lacking in explosive power, it cannot chase down fast fish, nor can it struggle against heavy prey. Instead, it sits patiently in the dark, waiting for a constant, ghostly rain to fall from the sunlit world miles above. A phenomenon known as marine snow. Marine snow is the great, unending chemical bounty of the upper ocean. In the epipelagic zone, where the sun fuels a massive food web of phytoplankton, zooplankton, fish, and marine mammals, life is constantly creating waste. When these organisms die, their bodies decompose, fracturing into microscopic particles. This debris, composed of fragments of dead cells, empty crustacean shells, fish scales, strands of mucus, and fecal pellets, binds together into light, fluffy flakes that drift slowly downward into the abyss like a silent underwater blizzard. By the time this organic snow reaches the bathypelagic layer, it has lost its structural identity, transforming into a rich, complex mixture of detritus, packed with proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. It is the literal crumbs falling from the table of the sunlit world. To harvest this falling organic blizzard without expending a single spark of unnecessary energy, the vampire squid deploys a unique piece of biological technology found in no other cephalopod. In addition to its 8 cloaked arms, it possesses a pair of highly specialized, retractable sensory filaments. These filaments are incredibly thin, pure white threads that can extend up to 8 times the actual length of the squid's body, looking like long, delicate antennas cutting through the void. The squid extends one of these filaments vertically into the water column, allowing it to drift passively alongside its body, while it remains completely stationary in the water. As the long, delicate filament drifts through the silent currents, its surface captures the falling flakes of marine snow. The filament is coated in millions of microscopic sensory cells and sticky mucus traps that act like organic flypaper, pulling the microscopic debris out of the water column. When the filament is fully loaded with organic matter, the vampire squid slowly retracts the thread, drawing it back toward its arms. The squid then uses its 8 cloaked arms to scrape the accumulated debris off the filament, mixing the collected flakes with a thick, internal stream of bodily mucus to bind the snow into dense, bite-sized pellets. Using the soft, hair-like cirri lining the inside of its dark cloak, the squid systematically passes these nutrient pellets down a conveyor belt of flesh, directly toward its central beak. It is a form of harvesting that completely bypasses the traditional mechanics of hunting. The vampire squid does not struggle, does not chase, and does not exert force. It simply sits in the permanent darkness, letting the gravity of the planet deliver its food directly to its mouth. Yet, despite its deeply peaceful lifestyle, the vampire squid is not entirely immune to danger. Occasionally, a deep-diving predator, like a sperm whale or a deep-sea shark tracking the edge of the oxygen minimum zone, will enter its sanctuary. Because the squid lacks the explosive speed to outrun an attacker, it has evolved a highly dramatic, visual, defensive strategy that subverts the traditional rules of deep-sea survival. When threatened, the vampire squid does not attempt to flee. Instead, it executes an extraordinary behavioral inversion known to science as the pineapple posture. It pulls its 8 arms entirely backward over its head, turning its dark web completely inside out. Instantly, its silhouette transforms from a soft, vulnerable cephalopod into a menacing, spike-covered orb, exposing rows of intimidating, fleshy cirri that look like sharp teeth in the dark. To complete this theatrical illusion, the vampire squid engages a highly sophisticated array of bioluminescent organs called photophores, which cover its entire body. It can flash the tips of its arms with brilliant, pulsing bursts of white light, or create 2 glowing circular spots on its mantle that mimic massive, unblinking eyes. By carefully dimming these glowing spots over several seconds, the squid creates a profound optical illusion in the dark to an approaching predator. The shrinking light makes it appear as though the squid is rapidly swimming away into the distance, when in reality, it is hanging completely motionless in the water. If the predator strikes anyway, the vampire squid releases a dense cloud of bioluminescent mucus from the tips of its arms. This is not normal black ink, which would be entirely useless in a world where light is already dead. It is a glowing, shimmering matrix of thousands of tiny stars that blazes in the dark for up to 10 minutes, completely blinding and disorienting the attacker, while the dark velvet ghost slowly slips away into the neighboring shadows. The evolutionary retreat of the vampire squid represents a magnificent, radical philosophy of survival that challenges our traditional human definitions of dominance. In our analysis of the natural world, we consistently celebrate the aggressive, the fast, and the destructive. The apex predators who conquer their environments through kinetic power and brute strength. But the vampire squid proves that true evolutionary brilliance can be found in the art of surrender. By choosing to step off the competitive treadmill of the upper ocean, by abandoning the heavy metabolic tax of hunting, and by learning to live entirely on the microscopic crumbs of the world above, this ancient creature has outlasted the rise and fall of countless empires on land and sea. It has survived the extinction of the dinosaurs, the freezing of the ice ages, and the cataclysms of geological time, remaining completely unchanged for over 200 million years. In the grand, silent library of the Pacific Abyss, the vampire squid stands as a beautiful, eternal monument to the power of pacifism, a proof that sometimes the ultimate way to win the brutal war of existence is to simply refuse to fight. As the vertical descent through the deep architecture of the Pacific approaches its late stages, the nature of the survival war undergoes its most profound, mind-bending transformation. In the shallow, sunlit pastures, life was a frantic race of speed and metabolic velocity. In the dark midwaters, it was an asymmetric campaign of mechanical camouflage and horrific cellular fusion. But as we move toward the extreme northern boundaries of the Pacific, where the deep ocean trenches merge into the freezing, sub-zero underworld of the Arctic currents, the environment introduces an entirely different kind of tyrant. Here, the primary enemy of survival is not a predator's jaw, nor is it the simple absence of light. It is the absolute, paralyzing reality of intense, permanent cold. In this icy kingdom, where the water temperature hovers at the literal boundary of freezing, the kinetic energy of life slows to a crawl. The dense fluid becomes heavy, chemical reactions stall, and the traditional muscle engines that power the upper world are completely paralyzed by the frost. To conquer an environment where the kinetic world has frozen solid, evolution does not attempt to fight the cold with heat. It does not invest in expensive, warm-blooded internal combustion engines that would rapidly burn through their fuel reserves just to maintain a baseline temperature. Instead, it executes a masterstroke of absolute systemic surrender, constructing a predator that has chosen to become the cold itself. This is an entity that does not fight the paralyzing drag of its world. It embraces it, slowing its internal clock down to a heavy, rhythmic pulse that ticks not in seconds or minutes, but in centuries. This is the Greenland shark, Somniosus microcephalus, which translates from the Greek as the sleepy-headed lizard of the deep. It is a creature that exists as a literal temporal ghost, a gargantuan slow-motion phantom that slips through the ice-cold currents of the northern trenches, silently outliving the rise and fall of human empires on land, without ever changing its agonizingly slow pace. Measuring up to 24 feet in length and weighing over a ton, the Greenland shark is a colossal dark shadow drifting through the murky sub-zero water column. Its physical appearance is a stark testament to its ancient, slow-burning lifestyle. Its body is thick, lumbering, and soft, entirely lacking the rigid, highly defined muscle packs that give pelagic sharks their terrifying grace. Its flesh is saturated with high concentrations of trimethylamine oxide and urea-toxic compounds that act as a biological antifreeze, preventing ice crystals from forming within its cells and tearing its tissues apart under the immense pressure of the deep. Its skin is a weathered, mottled slate gray, frequently scarred by time and colonized by unique bioluminescent parasites that cling directly to its corneas, blinding the shark while dangling like tiny, glowing lures in the dark. It is an animal that moves through the sea with the weight of a sunken log, a blind titan operating in a world where the concept of a hurry has been completely erased from the genetic code. To understand the true, staggering scale of the Greenland shark's existence, human science had to completely dismantle its traditional frameworks for measuring animal longevity. For generations, we believed that the maximum lifespan of a vertebrate was firmly anchored around the 150-year mark, a limit observed in giant tortoises and bowhead whales. But as modern marine biologists began to utilize radiocarbon dating techniques on the crystalline proteins found inside the eyes of captured Greenland sharks, they stumbled upon an evolutionary reality that borders on the mythological. They discovered that a female shark measuring 16 feet in length was not merely old. She had been swimming through the freezing dark for over 390 years. The oldest individuals in the population are estimated to have a lifespan that easily exceeds 5 centuries. This means that while human civilizations were fighting the Crusades, while the Renaissance was reshaping the face of Europe, and while industrial revolutions were charting the course of the modern world, the very same individual shark was drifting silently through the North Pacific trenches, breathing, growing, and waiting, entirely untouched by the frantic velocity of human history. The secret to this near mythological longevity lies within a biological architecture that has completely weaponized the concept of slowness. The Greenland shark possesses the lowest relative metabolic rate of any known shark species, an internal chemical engine that operates at a near-frozen standstill. Every physiological process inside its massive body is slowed down to the absolute minimum required to sustain cellular life. Its heart is a heavy rhythmic pump that beats only once every 12 seconds. A slow, deliberate thud that forces blood through its veins with the sluggish momentum of cold molasses. It does not possess the explosive, fast-twitch muscle fibers that allow other apex predators to launch high-velocity ambushes. Instead, its entire skeletal muscle matrix is composed of slow-twitch fibers that contract with agonizing deliberation. This near-frozen metabolism dictates a physical movement speed that borders on the static. The Greenland shark travels through the sub-zero water column at a cruising speed of barely 3/4 of a mile per hour, a velocity so slow that it is easily outpaced by a human toddler crawling on dry land. Even when it enters a state of maximum exertion, pursuing prey or reacting to danger, its absolute top sprint speed rarely exceeds a staggering 1.7 miles per hour. It is a creature moving through a permanent underwater time dilation field. To swim a distance that a sailfish would clear in a fraction of a second takes the Greenland shark several minutes of rhythmic, exhausting labor. It burns through energy with such tight, defensive precision that it can survive for months on a single, modest meal, turning the scarcity of the cold northern deep into a minor environmental inconvenience. Because its entire internal universe operates in extreme slow motion, the Greenland shark's life stages are stretched out across vast generational horizons that baffle human understanding. It grows at an agonizingly slow rate of barely half an inch per year. A juvenile shark must spend decades simply increasing its physical mass, drifting through the darkness as a small ghost before it can even begin to claim its place as a dominant predator. But the most shocking manifestation of this temporal elongation is its reproductive timeline. A female Greenland shark does not hit sexual maturity until she reaches a physical length of roughly 13 feet. In terms of chronological time, this means that she must survive the hazards of the deep ocean for over 150 years before her body is capable of producing her first litter of pups. She must live through 2 human lifetimes just to reach her own biological adolescence. a requirement for longevity that is entirely unique in the history of vertebrate evolution. To maintain this extreme, slow-motion lifestyle in an environment where active hunting would burn more energy than it returns, the Greenland shark has completely rewritten the manual on apex predation. It does not chase, it steals. It is the ultimate stealth scavenger of the sub-zero deep, a giant cleanup crew that operates under the radar of the kinetic world. Because it moves at less than 2 miles per hour, it cannot outswim a healthy seal or outmaneuver a panicked fish. Instead, it relies on a strategy of absolute acoustic and thermal invisibility, slipping up on its victims while they sleep soundly on the undersides of drifting ice floes, moving through the freezing dark like a silent slate-gray mountain. It uses its immense jaws to create a powerful internal vacuum, inhaling sleeping seals whole before they can even register the presence of a predator. What it cannot catch alive, it harvests from the dead. Armed with an incredibly acute olfactory system that can trace a single molecule of decaying flesh across miles of freezing currents, the Greenland shark tracks the falling carcasses of the polar world. When a massive bowhead whale dies, or a pod of narwhals becomes trapped beneath the shifting pack ice, this slow-motion ghost arrives at the scene. Using its upper teeth like sharp anchors to lock itself onto the carcass, it rolls its entire 1-ton body rhythmically, using its saw-like lower teeth to slice out perfect, circular plugs of blubber and flesh. It is a slow, methodical feast that can sustain the shark for half a year. A perfect demonstration of how a near-frozen metabolism can turn a localized ecological tragedy into a multi-century victory for a single individual. The epic 5-century saga of the Greenland shark represents a profound philosophical rebellion against the core tenets of modern evolutionary logic. In our analysis of survival, humanity has consistently equated success with velocity, dominance, and rapid, aggressive adaptation. We celebrate the fast, the reactive, and the creatures that reshape their environments through high-energy displays of power. Yet, this ancient, blind titan of the North Pacific trenches stands as a monumental proof that the ultimate victory over the tyranny of nature belongs to the slow. By systematically dialing its internal clock down to a near-frozen standstill, by embracing the paralyzing cold instead of fighting it, and by moving through existence with the unhurried weight of a glacier, the Greenland shark has successfully outlasted every empire that has ever risen and fallen on dry land. It is a living testament to the power of pacing, a silent, majestic declaration written into the icy currents of the planet that true evolutionary brilliance is not measured by how fast you burn through your spark, but by how beautifully you preserve it. In the Grand Library of the Pacific, the 500-year ghost remains a haunting, beautiful reminder that in the mathematics of deep time, the race does not belong to the swift, but to those who possess the quiet, unyielding patience to outlast the world. If the 5-century pilgrimage of the Greenland shark challenges our traditional understanding of biological time, there exists a deeper, even more silent stratum of the Pacific Empire, where the concept of a lifespan ceases to be an animal metric and becomes a geological epoch. To truly conquer time, one must eventually abandon the frantic mechanics of motion altogether. Movement requires muscles. Muscles demand high-energy fuel, and high-energy fuel inevitably burns out the delicate cellular machinery of life. Deep within the ancient abyssal foundations of the Pacific Basin, far below the swimming paths of sharks and the drifting highways of squids, lies a silent vanguard that has achieved near immortality by executing the ultimate structural surrender. They do not hunt, they do not migrate, and they do not run. Instead, they root themselves permanently into the bare volcanic basalt, transforming the raw minerals of the earth into a living, breathing archive that grows at the agonizing pace of a single millimeter per year. These are the deep-sea black corals, order Antipatheria, the true living lithographs of the ocean world. To find these ancient patriarchs, one must travel far past the vibrant, sunlit coral reefs that crown the shallow fringes of the tropical islands. The shallow reefs are frantic, high-velocity cities built out of calcium carbonate, heavily dependent on sunlight and the symbiotic algae that live within the tissues of the coral polyps. Those surface structures are highly fragile, vulnerable to the immediate shocks of temperature spikes, severe storms, and human destruction. But as the underwater topography drops off into the true twilight and midnight zones between 1,000 and up to 28,000 feet deep, the architecture shifts from fragile limestone into an unyielding organic steel. In these abyssal trenches, where the water pressure is measured in tons per square inch, and the light of the sun has been dead for millions of years, black corals construct magnificent, tree-like forests that look less like animals and more like the haunted, petrified woodlands of a forgotten world. Standing up to 15 feet tall, a mature black coral colony is a stunning, architectural marvel of the deep. Despite their common name, the living tissues of these corals are rarely black. They glow in vibrant hues of ghostly white, radiant gold, deep orange, or blood red, their delicate, anemone-like polyps extending tiny, translucent tentacles into the freezing current to catch passing particles of organic debris. But beneath this soft, colorful skin lies the true secret to their multi-millennial survival, an ultra-dense internal skeleton made of a unique, highly specialized material called antipatharin. This skeleton is not brittle like shallow water limestone. It is a complex chitinous matrix reinforced with mineralized proteins, possessing a structural flexibility and tensile strength that closely mirrors modern carbon fiber composites or high-grade industrial plastics. It is this dark, gleaming, wood-like skeleton which displays a deep, polished ebony sheen when stripped of its living flesh, that allows the coral to stand upright against the immense, crushing currents of the abyssal plain for thousands of years without snapping or deforming. The survival of these deep-sea forests requires a radical reconfiguration of growth dynamics. In the deep abyss, where nutrients arrive only as a sparse, irregular drift of marine snow, energy is the ultimate currency. Black corals cannot afford to grow rapidly. A burst of high-velocity cellular division would exhaust the local food supply and destabilize the structural integrity of their skeletal anchors. Instead, they expand at an agonizingly slow pace that matches the heavy, unhurried rhythm of the geological plates below. A deep-sea black coral colony increases its skeletal thickness by barely 5 to 25 micrometers each year, a growth rate so incredibly minute that it takes a century of uninterrupted, painstaking labor just to add a single millimeter of diameter to its trunk. To reach a height of 10 feet, a colony must stand undisturbed in the freezing darkness for longer than human civilization has recorded history, as the centuries and millennia roll past in a slow, silent parade. This microscopic growth pattern transforms the black coral's ebony skeleton into a flawless, high-resolution physical recording device, in a manner that directly mirrors the rings of ancient terrestrial trees like the bristlecone pine. The cross-section of a black coral trunk reveals a mesmerizing, concentric matrix of microscopic growth rings. Each individual ring represents a discrete chapter in the deep history of the planet, a physical lithograph pressed into the chitinous bone of the animal by the changing chemistry of the ocean. Because these corals draw their building blocks directly from the organic matter falling from the surface, every shift in global climate, every volcanic eruption, and every modification of the atmosphere leaves behind an indelible, unalterable chemical signature within the ring matrix.
Ghi chú của người biên tập. Đoạn về The survival of this deep-sea forest requires a radical reconfiguration of growth dynamics. Và đoạn As the centuries and millennia roll past. Trong bản gốc, bản cung cấp bị lặp lại 2 lần. Tôi giữ nguyên cấu trúc không lặp lại thêm để mạch truyện được tinh gọn. Logic nhất. Beyond their role as planetary libraries, these living lithographs serve as the foundational bedrock for an entire hidden ecosystem.
Standing tall above the barren volcanic plains, a single colony of black coral acts as an oasis of structural complexity in a flat, muddy desert. Its flexible, fan-like branches break the momentum of the deep abyssal currents, creating localized pockets of calm water where delicate organisms can seek shelter. Within the intricate lattice of its ebony framework, a diverse community of specialized deep-sea life takes root. Tiny, translucent, squat lobsters cling to the branches, using the coral as an elevated hunting platform to catch passing plankton. Brittle stars wrap their elongated arms tightly around the trunk, seeking protection from larger predators. And rare, deep-sea sharks utilize the base of the colony as a secure nursery, anchoring their leathery egg cases to the unyielding, chitinous stems. The black coral does not exploit or consume its residents. It merely provides the architectural sanctuary that makes their existence possible. It is a relationship of passive, monumental generosity, an ancient forest providing shelter to the children of the deep night for 40 or 50 human generations. Yet, this ultimate monument to longevity is now facing an unprecedented, catastrophic threat from the accelerating velocity of the human world. Industrial bottom trawling fishing vessels, dragging massive weighted nets across the sea floor to catch deep water fish, can instantly obliterate a 4,000-year-old coral forest in a single, blind sweep. What took 40 centuries of meticulous, millimeter-by-millimeter craftsmanship to build is reduced to shattered, polished debris in a fraction of a second. Furthermore, the rapid acidification and warming of the upper ocean are beginning to alter the chemical signature of the falling marine snow, introducing toxic disruptions into the delicate growth rings of the surviving colonies. As our vertical odyssey through the deep architecture of the Pacific comes to its definitive close, we are left with a profound, humbling realization. From the sunlit, hyper-competitive battlefields of the coral megalopolis to the horrific, self-obliterating symbioses of the midnight abyss. From the tragic forest-feeding pilgrimage of the crimson salmon to the quantum electronic navigation of the hammerhead. And finally, from the near-frozen 5-century slow-motion march of the Greenland shark to the multi-millennial chemical memories of the black coral, the ocean has revealed itself not as a silent void, but as a vast, interconnected mind. It is an empire where intelligence is expressed not through the narrow human metrics of technology or destruction, but through the beautiful, infinite variations of adaptation, design, and time. The Pacific is a living library of deep time, its stories written in the rings of ancient corals, the genetic pathways of migrating travelers, and the silent geometry of a pufferfish's sand circle. Each creature we have encountered is a masterwork of evolutionary engineering, a unique answer to the eternal question of survival posed by a changing planet. As humanity stands on the shores of this great blue wilderness, looking out across the endless liquid horizon, our ultimate responsibility is not to conquer, exploit, or re-engineer its spaces, but to simply learn how to listen. For in the grand, quiet chronicles of the deep, the ocean does not merely reflect the history of life. It holds the sacred, beautiful blueprint for its survival. As our vertical odyssey brings us back toward the upper layers of the Pacific, the narrative encounters a sudden, violent shift in reality. We are crossing into the Anthropocene, the age of human dominance, where the industrial machinery of a single terrestrial species has reached down to systematically weaponize and disrupt the last great wilderness on Earth. For tens of millions of years, the Pacific was a realm governed by primeval acoustics, the grinding of polar ice, the deep thud of underwater volcanoes, the crackle of snapping shrimp, and the haunting, complex songs of cetaceans echoing across entire ocean basins. For the marine mammals of the deep, sound is not merely a secondary sense. It is their primary vision, their navigation grid, and their social fabric. In a liquid empire, where light dies quickly, sound is the only medium that connects an animal to its world. To understand the absolute necessity of acoustics for whales and dolphins, one must confront the physics of water. In the ocean, light is a weak traveler, losing its energy and fading into absolute blackness within a few hundred meters. Sound, however, thrives in this dense fluid, traveling nearly 5 times faster through water than it does through air, and maintaining its structural integrity over immense distances. Through evolutionary epochs, cetaceans specialized this physical reality into a flawless sensory masterstroke. They developed echolocation, navigating and hunting by emitting high-frequency clicks and interpreting the returning echoes and low-frequency vocalizations that allow a blue whale to communicate with a mate across 1,000 miles of trackless sea. They do not look at the ocean. They listen to it, mapping their contours, tracking their food, and identifying their children through a pristine acoustic tapestry. But in a historical heartbeat, a mere blink in geological time, human civilization has torn this acoustic sanctuary apart. We have dragged the Industrial Revolution out into the open sea, turning the liquid highways of the Pacific into crowded commercial corridors. At any given second, tens of thousands of massive container ships, supertankers, and cruise liners are plowing through the surface waters. The titanic diesel engines of these vessels, coupled with the violent phenomenon of propeller cavitation, the rapid formation and collapse of vapor bubbles that tears through the water with the force of microscopic explosions, emit a non-stop, low-frequency roar. This is not a passing disturbance. It is a permanent, choking fog of synthetic noise that has raised the baseline background sound of the ocean by over 20 decibels in less than half a century, completely drowning out the natural frequencies of life. While the non-stop rumble of commercial shipping creates a permanent, suffocating blanket of background noise, it is the introduction of active military sonar and seismic oil exploration that acts as the ultimate acoustic weapon in the deep. For decades, naval forces have utilized mid-frequency active sonar, MFAS, to scan the ocean for submarines, blasting intense pulses of sound into the water column. These sonar pings are not gentle acoustic waves. They are concentrated walls of kinetic energy emitted at volumes exceeding 235 decibels, a sound intensity that, if experienced in the air, would be powerful enough to instantly burst human eardrums and liquefy internal organs. Directly alongside these military operations, the oil and gas industries deploy fleets of specialized seismic vessels that fire arrays of high-powered air guns directly into the sea floor. Every 10 to 12 seconds, for weeks or months on end, these air guns release explosive blasts of compressed air to map the geological strata beneath the mud. The sound waves generated by these explosions travel through thousands of feet of water, punching into the oceanic crust with enough force to echo back to surface receivers. To a whale swimming within 100 miles of these operations, the ocean ceases to be a peaceful home and becomes an active combat zone, a terrifying chamber of continuous industrial detonations. The biological consequence of this non-stop sonic bombardment is a catastrophic condition known as acoustic blindness. For a dolphin or a whale, losing the ability to hear clearly is equivalent to a human being having a thick, black blindfold tied securely around their eyes while being abandoned in the middle of a high-speed highway. The synthetic noise pollution completely masks the delicate echoes they rely on to perceive their surroundings. They can no longer hear the underwater trenches ahead. They can no longer track the fast-moving movements of the fish schools they need to survive. And they can no longer scan the dark voids for the telltale signatures of incoming predators like transient killer whales. Their primary map of reality is violently erased, leaving them disoriented, terrified, and fundamentally paralyzed within their own home. The most heartbreaking consequence of this acoustic blindness is the systematic destruction of cetacean social structures. Whales and dolphins are profoundly emotional, highly social creatures that live in tight-knit family units, often led by matriarchs who pass down generational knowledge across decades. Because they are frequently separated by miles of open water while foraging, they maintain their familial bonds through a complex system of vocalizations. Many species, particularly bottlenose dolphins and killer whales, possess signature whistles, unique, individualized acoustic names developed in infancy that allow family members to recognize one another instantly across the vastness of the sea. When a wall of shipping noise or a military sonar blast sweeps through a migratory corridor, it completely obliterates these signature whistles. The delicate, high-frequency names are drowned out by the industrial roar. Mothers can no longer hear the frantic distress calls of their calves. Pod members can no longer coordinate their tactical hunting maneuvers, and solitary individuals wandering the open ocean are cut off from the acoustic network that guides them back to their families. The results are devastating. Intimate family units are violently ripped apart, leaving young calves abandoned in the trackless blue, unable to navigate or feed, while their mothers search frantically through a wall of synthetic fog, screaming into a void that no longer answers. Driven to absolute madness and panic by the agonizing intensity of naval sonar pings, the psychological terror manifests in physical tragedy. To escape the deafening noise, deep-diving species like beaked whales will surface too rapidly, overriding their natural dive instincts. This sudden ascent causes nitrogen gas bubbles to violently expand within their bloodstreams and organs, resulting in decompression sickness, the underwater equivalent of the bends, bleeding from their eyes and ear canals. Their internal navigation systems completely shattered. Entire pods will swim blindly toward the shore, beaching themselves by the dozens on sandy coastlines. In the grand, tragic library of the Anthropocene, these mass beachings are not mysterious natural phenomena. They are the desperate, dying actions of a sensory masterwork that has been driven completely deaf by the unyielding arrogance of the human world. To silence the songs of the Pacific is to dismantle the very soul of the ocean, leaving behind a cold, mechanical highway where life can no longer hear itself live. The violent disruptions of acoustic blindness prove that the industrial scars we inflict upon the Pacific are never localized events. They are systemic disruptions that alter the very nature of marine survival. But the ultimate indictment of the Anthropocene does not manifest through sound alone. It unfolds through a silent, molecular invasion that is currently rewriting the physical chemistry of the entire liquid empire. Somewhere in the vast, swirling expanse of the North Pacific Gyre lies a monumental testament to human waste: the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is not a solid, floating island of trash, as many terrestrial observers imagine, but a colossal, thick soup of synthetic debris stretching across hundreds of thousands of square miles. Here, trapped by the circular momentum of the ocean currents, millions of tons of discarded consumer plastics float beneath the sun. Under the unrelenting glare of solar ultraviolet radiation and the mechanical battering of the surface waves, these plastics do not decompose. They fracture, breaking down into billions of microscopic shards, known to science as microplastics. To understand the horrific genius of this synthetic trap, one must follow the life cycle of a single, invisible fragment of this plastic debris. A microscopic fleck of polyethylene, no larger than a grain of dust, drifting passively within the upper sunlit waters. To the naked eye, this tiny particle looks completely insignificant, a harmless speck of industrial dust floating in a trackless blue desert. But as it drifts, its chemical composition acts as a highly effective sponge for toxins, absorbing persistent organic pollutants, heavy metals, and industrial pesticides that have leached into the ocean from coastal agricultural runoffs. It becomes a concentrated pellet of environmental poison. Floating alongside billions of identical particles, it enters the delicate, foundational layers of the marine food web, drifting directly into the feeding paths of the ocean's most abundant pelagic consumers. Swimming through these plastic-laden currents is a massive, tightly coordinated school of Pacific sardines, Sardinops sagax. Driven by their ancient, hardwired instinct to filter feed, these tiny fish swim with their mouths open, straining the water column for microscopic zooplankton. They do not possess the sensory apparatus to distinguish between a nutritious copepod and a toxic piece of industrial waste. As the school sweeps through the invisible soup of the garbage patch, our single microplastic fragment is swept directly into the gills of a mature sardine, sliding effortlessly down its throat and into its digestive tract. The fish cannot digest the synthetic material. The particle lodges itself permanently within its stomach lining, leaching its toxic chemical payload directly into the sardine's living tissues. The sardine does not die immediately. It continues to swim, carrying this microscopic seed of industrial destruction within its flesh as it navigates the dangerous highways of the open sea. The sardine, now a walking biological container for human industrial waste, does not swim alone for long. As its school crosses the edge of a deep-sea drop-off, it is intercepted by a pack of apex hunters tracking the thermal boundaries of the current, a school of Pacific bluefin tuna, Thunus orientalis. Moving with the explosive kinetic power of warm-blooded muscle engines, the tuna blast through the sardine formation, inhaling hundreds of fish in a fraction of a second. Our contaminated sardine is swallowed whole, dissolved by the powerful stomach acids of the apex predator. But while the organic flesh of the smaller fish is converted into energy to power the tuna's high-speed lifestyle, the synthetic microplastic fragment and its chemical toxins cannot be broken down. Instead, it enters a devastating ecological escalation known as biomagnification. Over its long life of hunting across thousands of miles of open ocean, a single tuna must consume thousands of smaller fish, squid, and crustaceans. If every sardine carries a microscopic payload of plastic, the apex predator effectively acts as a living vacuum cleaner, concentrating decades of industrial toxins within its own high-value muscle tissue. The poison climbs the evolutionary ladder, growing more dense, more potent, and more lethal with every single step up the food chain. The tuna becomes a magnificent, fast-moving repository of heavy metals, polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and broken synthetic polymers. A creature whose very flesh has been chemically altered by the trash thrown into the sea miles away. The final movement of this cycle brings the plastic home. Caught by an industrial longline vessel operating in the international waters of the Pacific, the tuna is flash frozen and shipped across global logistics networks, landing eventually in a high-end seafood market. From there, it is carefully prepared and served as a pristine, expensive fillet in a crowded restaurant. As a human diner picks up their fork to enjoy the catch, the karmic feedback loop closes with absolute mathematical precision. The very same species that designed the disposable plastic packaging used it for a few minutes and tossed it carelessly into the environment, now consumes it as a centerpiece of their dinner. The plastic has traveled thousands of miles, crossed multiple evolutionary frontiers, and waited for years, only to return to the human body that created it. It is a profound, tragic proof that in the grand architecture of the biosphere, there is no such place as a way. Every poison we release into the liquid wilderness eventually finds its way back to our own veins. This inescapable cycle of plastic consumption brings us face to face with the ultimate, undeniable truth of our relationship with the planet. We are not separate observers of the ocean. We are intimately, chemically bound to its fate. Our journey through the deep architecture of the Pacific began in the sunlit pastures of the shallow reef, where we witnessed the hyper-competitive brilliance of the coral megalopolis and the delicate geometric art of a solitary pufferfish sculpting its sand circle in the current. We descended further, tracing the tragic, nutrient-bearing pilgrimage of the crimson salmon feeding the ancient temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, before following the great hammerhead shark as it navigated the invisible volcanic magnetic grid lines of the open sea using an organic quantum compass, plunging into the absolute huanguk of the bathypelagic abyss. We witnessed how life can conquer the terrifying vacuum of permanent night through the horrific, self-obliterating sexual parasitism of the monstrous anglerfish, or the radical, peaceful economy of the velvet black vampire squid, harvesting the ghostly blizzard of falling marine snow. Finally, we encountered the grand masters of deep time. The 5th-century Greenland shark, cruising beneath the polar ice floes with a near-frozen metabolism, and the ancient black corals growing millimeter by millimeter over millennia, preserving an unbroken chemical ledger of the Earth's atmospheric history inside their ebony skeletons. When we look back across this monumental vertical odyssey, we realize that the Pacific is not a mute, empty expanse of water to be mapped, plundered, and discarded. It is a vast, interconnected, living library, a multi-billion-year-old archive of intelligence, design, and survival, where every species represents a beautifully engineered volume written in the sacred code of adaptation and time. Every creature we have met has a profound, irreplaceable role in maintaining the delicate equilibrium of this liquid empire. Yet, in less than a single human century, our industrial noise has blinded its cetacean singers, our chemical waste has poisoned its ancient food webs, and our global nets have begun to tear through its multi-thousand-year-old deep-sea forests. We stand at a critical, historic crossroads. Humanity is the only species in the long, epic history of this planet that possesses the capacity for conscious self-awareness, the unique ability to look out across the vastness of the sea, decode the complex physics of its currents, and comprehend the profound beauty of its evolutionary masterpieces. This intelligence is not a license to dominate or exploit. It is a sacred, monumental evolutionary mandate. It means we are the only entity capable of acting as the deliberate, self-aware guardians of this liquid library. We are the ones who must choose whether to protect these ancient volumes or systematically burn them down for short-term profit. To save the Pacific is not an act of charity. It is an act of absolute, existential self-preservation. The ocean is the literal blue heart of our planet, generating every second breath we take, regulating the global climate engines that sustain our agriculture, and holding the ancestral blueprint for life itself. If we allow this blue heart to quiet, if we let the ancient songs of the whales fade into a synthetic fog and permit the living lithographs of the abyss to be crushed into dust, we will not merely be destroying a beautiful wilderness, we will be erasing our own history, blinding our own future, and breaking our sacred covenant with the living cosmos. As the final rays of light fade beneath the waves of this grand cinematic journey, the deep architecture of the ocean leaves us with one final, haunting question. We have learned how to look at the stars. We have learned how to split the atom. And we have built a world of blinding speed and technology. But can we learn from the deep? Can we find the wisdom to dial back our frantic velocity, to listen through the industrial noise, and to live in harmony with the ancient, unyielding heartbeat of the planet? The answers are not written in the sky. They are waiting for us in the deep, silent chronicles of the great blue wilderness.